Back, New York's Department of Corrections has made an offer to end unsanctioned strikes outside of state prisons. The deal includes temporary changes to the HALT Act, plus changes to staffing, overtime, paid leave, and strict mail surveillance. The state also made body scanners mandatory for what they call contact visits, or visits without a screen or partition. However, many corrections officers and prison employees say they don't think any of these measures are enough to keep them safe. Part of the safety demands employees are referencing are tied to a series of chemical exposures at prisons across New York State. Most recently, almost 30 employees at Upstate Correctional Facility in Malone were involved in what the Department of Corrections refers to as chemical exposures. 3 of them happened within 7 days at the end of January. We spoke with Andrea Balek, the laboratory manager at Champlain Toxicology in Plattsburgh, about these exposures and other similar ones that have happened at New York State prisons over the last year.
So you've heard about these recent chemical exposures at Upstate Correctional Facility.
Oh, of course, yes.
What do you make of these 3 incidents that have happened and Hazmat's conclusion of not being able to identify the substance?
Well, it's certainly alarming. You can't live or work in northern New York without having friends or relatives, loved ones, somehow involved in correctional facilities, whether they're sworn officers or civilian employees. So it's certainly very alarming, very scary for all involved. So yeah, we need to figure out what's going on, certainly. As far as Hazmat's response, now I've been very fortunate in 35 years of working in the chemical industry. I've never had to deal with a hazmat emergency response. But what I know of them is there are different types of hazmat teams. There's like, I think, a type 1, type 2, type 3. And to my understanding, they're really looking more for chemical leaks, gas leaks, biological agents, whether they're airborne or infectious, where I'm sure they certainly looked for that, but with the opiate epidemic and all of the drug issues that that the world is facing right now, it's the wild, wild west. So there are so many things out there that I don't know if any one team is prepared to look for.
And what do you make of the reactions that these staff experience? Nausea, vomiting, some of them don't remember what happened, some of them passed out.
Well, you know, I've heard a lot of, shortness of breath and dizziness, and those two often go hand in hand. Whether it's a chemical exposure or a drug exposure, respiratory depression is very, very common with that. And respiratory depression often leads to dizziness because you're not getting enough oxygen where it needs to be, therefore you end up getting dizzy. So the toxicologist and the first responder in me really wants to know about, well, were they dealing with slow shallow breathing or fast shallow breathing? What were their pulses like? What were their blood pressure? Was it high blood pressure or low blood pressure? Was there nausea involved? Were there pinpoint pupils? Things like horizontal or vertical gaze nystagmus, which is involuntary muscle movements in the eyes, that can help either rule out or include certain drugs that they might have been exposed to.
What kind of tests do you think should have been done immediately after these exposures?
I was surprised to hear that there really wasn't much blood or urine testing done. So generally you'd want a blood test at the time that the person is feeling the effects of whatever they're going through. But then maybe the next day or a day later, look for a urine sample to see, because urine will show you past exposure. It can't exactly pinpoint when a drug was taken, but if you get a urine sample within a day or two, you can usually see what the person's been exposed to. So I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised that hadn't been performed.
And we talked about the potential of this substance being really anything.
Yes.
And how is that so?
Well, and I feel bad that I can't give you a more definitive answer, but it could truly be any one of 1,000 things. It could be an industrial chemical, it could be poorly mixed cleaning reagents, It could be inadvertent inhalant of a gas or dry cleaning fluid or anything like that, a glue. Or drug-wise, it could be inadvertent use of either a sort of a traditional drug that we've heard of, or something that we now call in this industry an NPS, a novel psychoactive substance. And that's where I was saying before, it's kind of like the Wild Wild West. These drugs, most of these drugs aren't even controlled yet, because they'll take a basic drug class, and there's some real good synthetic chemists out there that can rearrange the molecule to have even more intense and more severe reactions to it. We hear a lot about fentanyl, but there are also fentanyl analogs out there that are even more potent than fentanyl, that are way more potent than fentanyl. Potentially it was something like that. There is a lot of misinformation out there, unfortunately, about like if you get a little bit of drug substance fentanyl on you, that's going to cause an overdose. It would be really difficult to overdose from something like that. And those are the kind of things that we want people to be able to take some comfort in. But when it comes to novel psychoactive substances, we really don't know.
And talk to me about just the challenge of, even if tests were sent here, how difficult is it to determine what it actually is because of the limit on certain drugs that are tested here at the lab?
Well, here, Champlain Toxicology Lab is kind of a traditional, small toxicology lab. We can do testing for people that are undergoing pain management theory, that are dealing with medication-assisted treatment for opioid addiction. So we do sort of general toxicology. If people are prescribed drugs, we look for commonly prescribed drugs. We also do look for some illicit drugs, but they're the common ones that have been around for a while. So your methamphetamines, your cocaine, thing like that. What we did start, we were one of the first labs in the Northeast to start regularly looking for xylazine when that popped on scene a few years back. But a lot of these drugs have to be around for a while, and we have to see a lot of them or hear about a lot of them in the population before a lab like us can start analyzing.